And I mean this with all my heart. And it's something that the Lord has been teaching me over the last 12 years. And I'll tell you a little bit about what I mean later when it comes to my own personal struggle with anger. You probably wouldn't think I'm an angry person if you know me, but something I've really struggled with in my life. And today, Jesus is trying to get us to understand some things about anger. It's very important to realize that we're living in a culture that is a cauldron of anger and contempt. Those are the words of Dallas Willard, and much of this teaching is coming from his book, The Divine Conspiracy, on anger and contempt. He says we're living in the boiling cauldron of anger and contempt in North America, and indeed the world. And if you look at some of the things that anger does in a year, okay, you've got 1 million plus work injuries from anger in North America. You've got, just in the States, 13,000 gun deaths from anger. That's where it comes from. That's just in the States. You thought 1,420 people dying from fentanyl overdoses in BC alone was bad, and it is. This stuff's coming from stored up anger. We're indeed living in a place that people store up their anger from work, from school, from being picked on, from feeling like they don't matter, from their wounded ego. And this is especially true for men. Your ego gets wounded when someone says, I've got some advice for you, do you want it? And right away you're like, oh, no, I don't, right? Or they correct you. You tell me a man that likes to be corrected. You tell me a man and a lot of women that don't like to be argued with, like if this is my opinion, it's right, I'll tell you your opinion if I want it, right? That's the culture we live in. And we get mad when someone disagrees with us, right? Children get mad when you cross their will. You know, like, no, I want that brownie. The brownie stays on the top shelf, locked in the Tupperware until you eat some good food, right? The kid's like, meh, they throw the bowl of soup across the wall. One day, I'm on my way to school with my brother Paul. I'm in grade 6, Paul's in grade 4. And I knew what pressed Paul's buttons. It was calling him son. And I just kept at it. I turned around. Next thing I knew, I was on the ground because his metal lunchbox had been swung around. And that poor kid's anger had erupted over. And I'm on the ground, and I'm like, what the heck? And he's like, I'm sorry. And I'm like, I'm sorry too. Stop calling you son. Because I realized that it wasn't funny, right? Then you got my anger being picked on in grades 7, 8, and 9 by Tony Campanella and Bruce and all those guys at school, and the name that they came up with me with and tormented me with in the row behind me as a little kid. And my anger came out in my comic books. I made Tony into Killer Campanella, and I would beat the tar out of that guy in the comic books, right? And then when I was bigger than the kids down the street, I remember Thomas, this nice kid, one day I was like, just say that one more time. I was just waiting for the opportunity. And I punched him in the face. And I thought it was going to feel good. And I hear his mom from the window saying, oh, real good, real good. And I realized how the bullied had become the bully. This happens all the time. This is very serious stuff. Because Jesus, as you heard his stern words in this chapter, says this stuff will destroy you if you don't get rid of it. I say to you, and this is what it means, okay? It's not a sin to be angry, but what he's saying is anybody that continues to be angry, okay? You're going to condemn yourself. He's not saying that God's up there and he's just waiting for you to blow in and get angry and he's going to condemn you. He's saying you continue to be angry, you're going to throw yourself into a prison that's going to destroy you and your relationships. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about how anger happens, and we know it does, okay? God gets angry. We get angry at injustice. You see something happening in the world or at work or at school, and you get ticked about it. And that's because you're made in the image of God, and he gets mad at evil. You get mad at evil. That's a right response to it. Anger is amoral. It's just an emotion, right? But the problem is if you continue to be angry and you let the anger fuel you're actually just drifting into revenge, not justice. Right? 9/11 happens. Okay? It's the Muslims. Right? Not all Muslims, but they're the enemy now. Right? And that's, I was listening to Dallas Willard talk about anger this week on his YouTube talk about this. And he says after 9/11, everybody in churches in the States got it in their heads that this was a righteous war, especially when Jerry Falwell gets up there and he says, go out and destroy the enemy in the name of the Lord. And all his TV audience, and he's a preacher, and he's saying that to everybody on his TV audience. Go out and kill the enemy in the name of the Lord. Right? Now, sometimes war needs to be happening, but rarely has it ever been done righteously. Sometimes you have to fire somebody. I know one pastor that had to fire his youth pastor. But you know what he did? He continued to have that youth pastor and his wife over every Sunday night and mentor them and love on them even after he had to be fired. Because he fired him in love, not in anger. Right? He stopped him from going down a path that would have led to his destruction, but he continued to be his friend and love him. And that's the difference between Christian anger at sin, stop it, I restore you, I bring you back up, I restore you. I don't put you beyond the pale. I've seen it done wrongly where churches just let a guy go, and that guy now has no community. He's beyond the pale, which means there's the fire with the community, and the pale is the light of the fire and the warmth. And once it's faded, you're back out there where we can't see you. We just want you swept under the rug. That's done in anger and not in Christian love. Anger happens. You can't stop it. Somebody steps on my toe, I'm going to, what are you doing? And then they go, I'm sorry. And if I'm smart, I'll go, it's okay, right? I forgive you. Let it go, right? Some people will bump into you, Jesus says. There's a Greek word for it's like, I'll just bump into you. Not mean to sin against you. Well, let that go. And then some people will batter you on purpose with a sin. And you'll get angry about that. He says, you got to let that go too. Because they're human like you. But if you let that store up inside you, it's going to be a real problem in your life. Anger happens, but see, we choose to continue to be angry. We really do. I get angry about stuff that happens during my work week. I've learned I've got to take it to the Lord in prayer. I got to talk to a good Christian friend that won't judge me. I don't have to walk in eggshells with them, and I got to talk to my wife. And I get it off my shoulders, onto the shoulders of God, and on those that love me, and it diffuses. But you got to learn that. That's why counseling is important. Some people don't have a friend or a good wife they can talk to, and they need to talk to somebody and offload it. Because if you hold on to it and store it up, that's where you get something called the word postal. That wasn't a word. Going postal wasn't a word until the 80s when a post office worker killed like 16 of his friends in a post office. Right? That wasn't a word. 1999 was the Columbine shooting. That was the first mass school shooting that I can recollect. And it shocked the whole continent. We all watched the memorial service. Saw Amy Grant and Michael W. Smith singing there, bringing comfort to this town of Columbine. And now mass shootings at schools are so regular, it's not even funny. You used to watch the Seattle news and you'd hear about gun violence, gun violence, gun violence. And you watch the Vancouver news and it was like there's a fire or somebody who was caught drunk driving. Now you watch the Vancouver news and it's gun violence, gun violence. Chilliwack last night, Global News, gang violence. It's coming up because the world's getting angrier and angrier. Are you going to be part of that, Jesus says? Or are you going to be part of the solution? This is serious stuff. You choose to continue to be angry. You pick it up and you hold on to it. One friend put it this way. You got an offense. Somebody's put an offense in front of you. You choose to pick up the offense, or you choose to leave it there and leave it with God. But you hang on to that, it's going to poison you. We carry a supply of anger in us that way. It starts to, there's a cauldron in you and it starts to boil. Road rage doesn't happen because somebody cut you off. It happens because the person that goes into road rage has been carrying around a supply of anger in him, and the vat of jet fuel is filling up, and that cutoff is the spark. Boom. My brother Tim driving the highway by Langley, doing us 110, like you do, because you can do about 110, you won't get a ticket. And he's doing the 110, and this guy passes him at about 120, and Tim's like, whoa, he's going faster. He's going 130, 140. And Tim says, and then another guy passed me going way faster than the first guy, and he didn't stop until he rammed that guy. And Tim says, I put my brakes on and watched 2 cars explode. Because road rage is a real thing. That guy who rammed him had it. That guy was the spark that set off the jet fuel he'd been carrying around in him. Do you want a bunch of jet fuel inside of you? You're carrying around a pack of dynamite with a timer on it if you don't put down your anger, if you don't offload it. It's that serious. You will blow up on somebody. Jesus says, get rid of it. Paul wrote, you got to rid yourselves completely of these things. Anger, rage, malice, slander, obscene, abusive, filthy, vulgar language from your mouth. You can see how all that stuff comes from anger, Paul says, right? Get rid of the anger, because look what it's causing. It's going to cause rage. Malice. You're going to have malice in your heart about some guy. I remember a year ago where I had a day where I wanted to punch another Christian. That's how I felt. I imagined my fist, and I'm like, oh, Lord, I got to get alone with you for a while. Because if I want to punch another Christian, there's a real problem, right? Obscene, filthy language. I know I'm angry when I swear. If I swear, I'm like, oh boy, I'm having a bad day. I got to get alone with God. Got to talk it out with Sandra. Got to get down and just be Bob with somebody and vent to somebody I love, because they're going to listen to me, because I'm telling you right now, what comes out of your mouth comes out of your heart. And so Paul says, you got to get rid of it. It has no place in your life. Harbored anger becomes even worse. It becomes contempt. It grows. It takes root in your life, in your heart, and it puts down roots and starts to grow into this tree that's bearing bitter fruit. And Jesus talks about this in Matthew 5. He says that what happens is you become a person that's got sarcasm and ridicule and slander and lies. You belch out insults. I was reading Psalm 59 just in my devotions this morning. And David says, there's people I know, and this is how they live. They snarl like dogs. You ever look at somebody and they're just like, right? Like all the time, right? Harrison Ford's kind of got that going on. You don't know if he's going to hug you or punch you, right? I've had some bosses who are like, just look, well, it keeps you on your toes. But, they've got this permanent anger face, right? And then their words, it may not come out in yelling. It may come out in just subtle jabs all day long. Subtle put-downs, right? Jesus said, it'll come out in the word raka, right? And raka was a word that sounded like the accumulation of, you're going to spit at somebody. That's how much you hate them. It means you empty-headed, useless waste of skin. Today we would use words like idiot, twerp, twit, moron, schmuck, right? Bozo, putz, nerd, loser, right? And you watch comedy on TV, there's always one character on that TV show who is good at making you laugh by a carefully crafted, funny put-down. So I'm a youth pastor. 1997. The .com thing's new. I'm watching some TV show, don't remember what sitcom it is, but the guy says to his friends, yeah, he founded loser.com. Ha ha, you hear the canned laughter, everybody laughs. He founded loser.com. That was funny, right? I said that to one of my youth, Samantha, one day at a ministry team meeting. How could I do that? And while I was writing this sermon, the Lord reminded me of that. And I think I probably said sorry to her back then. But you know what? I found her on Facebook. And I wrote her a letter this week, and I said, I want you to know that I was wrong and I'm sorry. And I've learned a lot since I was youth pastor in 97. And I had to apologize to her because how could I do that? Because obviously, I had to supply anger in me. And when Sam did something at youth group, I thought it was funny to say that to her. It wasn't funny, right? I assassinated her very being as a person, right? And what Jesus says is the solution to anger, number one, is to remember that love is the solution. And if you really love somebody, love won't keep a record of wrong. This is where anger starts to store up in you because you're a meticulous record keeper. You're a good record keeper. You're going to write that down in the bottom of your heart. I had one family in Quesnel after I'd been there 9 years sit down with me and my dad and read me a 3-page litany of everything I'd done to let down their family. And I sat there and I was just like, wow, these guys got a good memory. Wow. And then I remember just sitting there feeling like I felt so, like, why didn't you tell me? Like, you know, why did you store this up until one day it came out like an eruption? I just wanted to quit my job. And the only good thing that came out of that is I wrote a song about it that helped me deal with the pain. But I had tried so hard and I just did nothing but let them down. And that's all they remembered. They didn't remember the good stuff I did for their kids. They just remembered, but then I remembered the mom grew up with the dad that was such an alcoholic, such a horrible man, that she thought that way of every man. And then what was coming out of her on me was going actually out on her dad. She'd never learned to work through that. But that'll destroy people around you if you keep a record. And then remember this word, love is humble. You know what that means? Sometimes, Jesus said it, settle with the person before it gets to court. They have proven that many, many lawsuits against doctors would be dropped if doctors were allowed by the hospital to apologize for an accidental knife cutting a spleen or something like that. They've proven that most people just want an admission of wrong, that I hurt your loved one with my surgery, I let you down, I'm sorry. That's all they want. But many hospitals won't allow them to apologize. But it's proven that it would go away. It would be dropped. Because if love is humble, it means that you say sorry right away. You don't let it sit there for 10 years. Being humble is saying, like, I'm sorry I hurt you. And not, I'm sorry you took it that way. That's not an apology. I'm sorry I did wrong and hurt you. I did this and hurt you. I'm wrong. Right? I'm sorry I let you down. Love is humble. And then remember that if you have love, and the love of God especially, love isn't easily provoked. Yeah, it can be provoked, but there's a long road of grace before you got to do something about it. It's not easily provoked. You don't fly off the handle. The Message rewords that one in 1 Corinthians 13. Love doesn't fly off the handle at the smallest thing, right? It's saying, okay, I need to change. My fuse has got to be a lot longer if I'm going to be like Jesus. But this is the thing, right? Is you don't let your anger deceive you, because anger feels right almost every time it happens, right? It almost feels right every time. It's like confronting somebody in the middle of a hot affair. They are not going to feel like they're doing wrong. It's not going to feel like you're wrong when you got your anger, ever. But you got to step back and doubt your anger's veracity and doubt whether it's good. Take assessment. Dallas Willard says, parents, don't punish your kids when they anger you, when they're mad. Say, you need to go to your room, and I need to think about this. And then think it through. Don't punish them in anger. Punish them when you've thought it out, you've talked to your wife, you've come up with the appropriate discipline. And guess what? The time that kid's stewing in the room wondering what's going to happen to them, is probably all the punishment they're going to need. My mom would just say, she's taking care of 3 boys. Dad's going to seminary 5 days a week in Toronto. It's her managing the 3 boys. She would just say, wait till Friday when your dad gets home. Whoa, that was it, right? But don't let your anger trick you into thinking that it's righteous. Jesus, man with no sin, Jesus is going into the temple and he sees the poor being cheated out of their money because they have to have a sacrifice by Mosaic law. He sees people quadrupling the price of the sacrificial doves, which the poor was the only animal they could afford to buy. And they're gouging people at the sacrifice market before they get into the temple. Jesus, being God, you could trust him to make a whip out of ropes and turn all those tables and say, get out of my house. This is supposed to be a house of prayer, you thieves. You can trust him to do that. I can't trust myself to thin the herd at church. I can't trust myself to thin the herd. Jesus, I can trust. Me, I'm going to have to be patient with all you human beings, and you're going to have to be patient with me. Right? So that's our call, is to let him be God and him be the judge. You see, in fact, when Jesus came to the earth, people are, you see a lot of fundamental Christians like, there's going to be judgment on you for what you're doing right now. They got their signs and everything. They're forgetting John 3:17, where it says, the Son of Man did not come into the world to condemn or judge the world, but to save it. But people that reject him, they judge themselves. He doesn't even judge us. He puts it in our court. I've just come to save you. If God with skin on didn't do the judging and the pointing out, and instead he left it in people's court. If you want help, I'm here. But if you don't want my help, you judge yourself, because I'm the only help you're going to get. But we have to take on his attitude as Christians and not be doing this, right? We got to be doing this in the mirror. In fact, I don't want any pointing at you. We got to be doing this. That's what we got to do, right? So don't let your anger deceive you. Paul said, if you're going to be mad at sin, at immorality, at injustice, at ungodly behavior. Yet do not sin. Don't let your anger cause you shame, nor allow it to last until the sun goes down. Don't give the devil an opportunity to lead you into sin by holding a grudge, which is just nurturing anger. That's nurturing anger. Or harboring resentment, or cultivating bitterness. Paul says, yeah, be angry at something wrong, but don't become an angry person. So my geek comes out, and this is what I'm going to show you. Get rid of it, or it will make you pay hell. And if you watch how Darth Vader became Darth Vader, you will see the journey as anger took him to the dark side, where he became a monster and would even kill children in the Star Wars trilogy. It made him lose his wife. It made him become a murderer and a horrible villain. And it was all subtle. He thought he was doing the right thing. He sold his soul to the devil so he could get enough power so he wouldn't lose his wife, and ended up losing her when he got the power, because he'd become a monster to get the power. And it all just led him to the dark side. It will make you pay. And that's where I think Jesus isn't just talking about human court. It's going to take you to human court and you're going to get condemned. It's going to take you to the court of the law of God, and you're going to send yourself to hell in a handbasket by your anger, by letting it run away, right? But, you know, us guys, we watch movies like Rambo and Die Hard when we were growing up, and we love that. Because we are going to make those bad guys pay. Not my job, right? My job is to defend people, and if it takes some righteous war once in a while, so be it, but it better be righteous. Don't go down Darth Vader's path. How to get rid of it? Excuse me for a sec. How to get rid of your anger? Well, the answer is the cross. God got angry at the world. We all told him to get lost, and he got angry at the world. He says they're going to have to pay. Somebody's going to have to pay, because that's justice. When something happens to you, you want somebody to pay. Justice is built into the fiber of our being. But God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit, our God, 3 in 1, came up with the plan that Jesus would leave heaven and he would go to the cross, and all of God's anger would be vented on him on the cross, because God so loved the world, he didn't want us to go to hell. So all of hell's wrath and fury and the punishment of sin went on Christ on the cross. That's why it was such a horrible death, the worst death in all history. All of God's anger went on the cross. And that's where my anger's got to go too. That's how you get rid of it. And you get rid of it one layer at a time. We're all onions of hurt. We're all onions of betrayal. We're all onions of letdowns. And you peel away an onion layer, and for a while you'll feel okay about it, and then something will come up and you'll be angry at the person again for the injustice or the perceived injustice. Peel off another layer and throw it in the trash. Right? I told the kids on Thursday night, we had the same talk, just a little shorter, and I said, on the onion, you gotta write down the sin, not the name of the person, in case somebody finds it. Write down the betrayal on the onion skin, right? Write down the lie. Write down the letdown. Peel it off. Throw in the trash. Say, Jesus, because you forgive them, I forgive them. Then they're going to do something because they're human. They're going to tick you off again, even though you've forgiven them. And they're going to just be a jerk one day. And you got to peel off that layer and throw that in the trash. And Hayden Gilbo said after junior youth, when his dad picked him up, Dad, I need to get an onion before bed. But Neil Anderson says forgiveness is an onion. You got to let your anger go to the cross and keep peeling it off, and then one day it's going to get down to nothing. There was probably 3 guys on the search committee in Quesnel 12 years ago that didn't want me to be the pastor. It had to be unanimous for me to get the job. I was stupid to apply for my dad's job. You don't do that. It's Randy Evans. And I applied. Those 3 guys held it back. And a couple seniors that didn't like my youthful way of doing things. So I was a youth pastor. And I'm in Superstore, and I didn't realize how angry I was. I run into Frankie Berge, wonderful senior, and she says, we miss you. And I go, oh, really? You seniors are the one that kept me from getting the job. Look how, there's the volcano, right? Like, obviously been stewing in me for months. I see poor Frankie from Quesnel in Superstore in Prince George, and she wants to say, we miss you, and I do that to her, right? Or I'm in the parking lot at Quesnel on my last day. I go out to get in the car, and I see Ernie, and he is a missionary and his beautiful wife to the First Nations. He's 70, he's retired, and he says, Bob, and he wants me to stop so he can say goodbye to me. I get in the car and I peel out of there. I'm not talking to you, you old man. Right? It was the last time I saw Ernie, and that was the last time I saw Frankie. She just died before Christmas. And I just remember this now. I'm like, man, I was an angry young man. And do I ever regret that? Praise the Lord, by the blood of Jesus, I'm forgiven, and I'm going to see them both in heaven. But man, I regret that being my last encounter with those 2 dear old saints, because I was painting all the seniors in the church with the same brush, that they didn't want me to be their pastor. This is serious stuff. Do you want to stand before God and say to him, when he asks the question, why did you hold this against this person? Just so you could be right your whole life, and now you're up here in heaven and you regret it? Do you really think that's a good enough reason to not be humble and apologize, or be a record of wrong keepers, and you should have just erased that and thrown that piece of onion skin in the trash? You will not want to be there. You will be glad that you let it go. And Jesus, like I said last week, he said, I've come to give you a happy life, the happiest life possible, a blessed life, a life to be admired. When you let go of your anger and put it on the cross, which I came to kill it, you will be just a happier person. Your blood pressure will go down. And I remember the day after I'd lived here about 3 years where I was like, I haven't thought about those guys in Quesnel on the board for a long time. The onion's gone. I got down. It was gone. My anger was gone. Then one of them asked to be my friend on Facebook, which is a new thing. And I was able to click yes. I could have said no. But I clicked yes because the onion was gone. But you got to realize that as a Christian, you're crucified with Christ. And that means your anger is nailed to the cross. That wonderful hymn we sang, the last verse, I swore I could hear the trumpet of Jesus. I thought he was coming back when the trump shall resound. But that one verse, my sin, oh, the bliss of this glorious thought. What about if you put my anger, oh, the bliss of this glorious thought. My anger, not in part, but the whole, has been nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. What a beautiful thing that would be, right? Your pride is nailed to the cross. Your ego, right? Your sin, my sin, your sin. So I'm not going to hold your sin against you, and you don't hold your sin against me when we let each other down. It's all crucified with Christ. I am crucified with Christ, therefore my anger no longer lives, but Christ lives in me instead. Reword it that way. I am crucified with Christ, therefore my pride no longer lives, but Christ lives in me. Let it go. You're going to be so much happier. And Jesus said, when you come to worship, especially today, to the communion, we're drinking some juice and eating some bread that represents Christ's body being broken and his blood shedding for my sin. And he says, you got to forgive if you want to be forgiven, because let it go. Don't play at church. Remember what Jesus said? He wants real rightness of the kingdom heart. He doesn't just want you to play at worship and do a religious thing. Don't be like the mafia that live like hell all week and use communion for absolution. That's why they love being Catholic. Be a real Christian who's saying, today I'm sacrificing my pride on the cross. The person that made you mad might not be here. Today, before you take that cup, you can say, Jesus, I forgive him because you forgave me. And Lord, when the anger comes back tomorrow, help me to peel off another onion skin layer. Help me to really examine my heart if I'm boiling over in anger. You know what? And I'm not saying that when you forgive somebody, you're going to carry their picture around in your wallet the rest of your life. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that when you forgive, you are making the choice to leave it at the cross. And when it comes back on Monday morning, put it up on the cross again, throw that onion skin. Worship team, come up. Guys, come up and grab the elements, start distributing it. I want you to examine your heart and just today be forgiven and forgive. And to let the anger be nailed to the cross. And I'm going to get... Steve, could you go to the music room down the hall and get Kim so she can run the lyrics for Sunday school class? And I want you to just bow your heads, if you will, for a moment while the music begins. And I want you to close your eyes and just contemplate your heart. Check it. You guys are good at checking your weather apps. Check your heart today. Okay? And start, boys, you start passing out the communion stuff. And just bow your heads, close your eyes, say, Jesus, thank you that you took my sin and you nailed it to the cross. Today I take my sin of unforgiveness, I nail it to the cross. I take Charlie's sin and I nail it to the cross. I won't make him carry that around, and I won't carry it around anymore. How deep your love is for me, Jesus, make me be deeper in my love for others. I repent. I turn away from my pride. I give you my heart today. Make me more like you. Today's the day where you could be saved. You could say, I'm going to be saved from my sin. I'm going to let Jesus forgive all my sin. It's going to be buried in the tomb. I'm never going to dig it up again. And then you take that cup and that piece of bread and you hold on to it till it's handed out. And we're just going to say, I don't bear this anymore, Jesus. Let's sing.